going on here. So Tim?
Thanks, Margaret, and thanks everyone for coming here tonight. It's always hard to go after David. You know, I'm taller, but smaller and experienced, so we'll see what I can do. I want to pick up where he left off a little bit and dive into where we're at as a result of the actions of this government. As David so aptly described, the creation of the Greenbelt, the creation of the Niagara Escarpment Plan, the creation of the Oak Ridges Moraine, the beginning of moving our cities and towns towards something that is more sustainable, where you could actually have access to public transit, where you could get to services without your car, turning the trajectory away from the sprawling development that has dominated Southern Ontario since the Second World War and when cars took over our culture. That was all beginning to happen. And this government wants to go in the opposite direction. So let's explore a little bit about that. So we had, I don't know, what are you saying, David, 40 years of governments, NDP governments, Liberal governments, conservative governments, that all saw the reason for moving in this direction until Premier Ford and his new government. We know that in 2018 that this new government was elected with the aggressive support of Ontario Proud and its online attack machine. You probably saw some of the ads on Facebook. This was characterized by the people behind Ontario Proud and their dominance on social media as being grassroots supported by the donations of people like you, eager to turn the page and get beyond all this horrible planning and environmental protection. But we found out 6 months after the election that Ontario Proud was actually funded by a consortium of developers. Chief among them was Mattamy Homes, and they collectively contributed $500,000 to run the attack ad campaign on the previous provincial government. Many of which, the ads, if you've seen them, were attacks on the Premier at the time, many of them viciously homophobic and misogynist. These are the people that are behind what we're seeing in Ontario right now. The results of these developers really grabbed the ear and the attention of our newly elected Premier and his government. As the Premier himself has said, and David mentioned this, he says these people are his friends. These developers made no secret they don't like the rules that protect wetlands, forests, farms, and the Greenbelt. They don't like rules that make them build more homes and communities, or rules that make them more financially accessible to people that need to buy homes. Why is that? Well, it's because they make vast sums of money buying farmland cheap, getting it rezoned for development, and then building expensive single-family detached homes on it. By the way, they also don't like any rules that make them pay for the costs of new sewers, roads, water supplies, schools, parks, or anything else that are required to service these low-density, distributed communities built in our natural spaces. So the developers had a great friend in the Premier's office, a friend who wanted to help them. And then they were presented with another opportunity, housing prices. Rising housing prices in Ontario have been driven by years of historically low interest rates, foreign and domestic buyers who see buying a house or an extra house as a no-lose investment opportunity, changes to tax laws that killed rental housing construction, and governments, many governments, removing themselves from the task of supporting development of housing like co-op housing. These factors all combined together to cause a decade-and-a-half run on housing prices until they were reaching absolutely unaffordable levels. Then enter the COVID pandemic, inflation, and then risingly rapid interest rates as federal governments and banks, national banks across the world try to get a handle on inflation. And then we had a situation where homes that were previously already getting really expensive, leaping out of reach for all those with the very rich, those who are selling an existing high-value property and moving somewhere else, or happen to have parents that are millionaires. So a long simmering problem became a crisis. And the old adage of never missing an opportunity in a crisis is not unknown to the billionaire sprawl developers and their friends within our Ontario government. And so began the loud and repeated proclamations by the Premier, his ministers and developers that environmental protection, planning rules, and the Greenbelt were creating a scarcity of land available for homes, and that's why housing prices and rents are so high. It's the environment, it's rules, it's everybody else's fault, and the solution, of course, give more land to the developers. Well, that could seem like it made sense. For the average person who does not know the details of housing supply and prices, it might sound reasonable. If you increase the supply of something, maybe it should become cheaper. Unfortunately, this is a situation where the simple solution is also the wrong one. Why is that? Firstly, there was and is no shortage of land designated for housing construction in this province. This is because cities and regions are legally required to plan for all of their housing needs for all of the population that's going to arrive in their cities for 30 years out. They know what's coming, they plan for it, the land is already allocated. So what does that mean? It means when this government was elected, there was already a massive surplus of land already designated within our towns, within our cities to build houses on. In fact, there was so much land designated that if we only took 20% of that land and built at the densities of the neighborhood where I live in downtown Toronto, like Trinity Bellwoods, if you've ever been there, low-rise houses, single-family, semis, townhouses. This isn't a neighborhood of skyscrapers and monster condos. It's low density. Build at that density, we would use 20% of the land that's already been designated. Just ignore the rest of it in the Greenbelt. Another aspect of this misunderstanding is that making more land available will not, under any circumstances, make sure that more houses are built. Now, why is this? Almost nobody who's buying a new house in this region at this time buys a piece of land, finds an architect, finds a contractor, and builds their own house. Maybe in the 1950s, when my parents built their house here in Barrie, maybe that's how you did it. That's how my dad did it. But nobody does that. Where do you get your new home? You buy it from a large developer in a massive subdivision. You might buy a condo in a monster building in a city, but no one's building their own house. So what do the developers do? They get holds of these large chunks of land, and they put houses onto the market slowly. And they do that in conversation with each other, in regards to the market. They do that in a way to maintain a high price. They're not in the business of selling houses cheap to help all of you. They're in the business of selling houses expensive to make lots of money. So more land, all that does is allow them to speculate. Buy it cheap from the farmers, get it rezoned, like they're doing with the Greenbelt, and make a lot of money on the increase in value. And as our Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner and the Housing Affordability Task Force have all shown, none of these facts matter to the Ontario government and their developer friends. And so Ford Nation attacks on 60 years of progress began, and there are many. 7,400 acres of land taken out of the Greenbelt, including parts that had been legislatively protected for 15 years. The reanimation of the 413 Zombie Highway, canceled by the previous government. Rules protecting wetlands so gutted that our conservation authorities tell us that 85 to 95% of the wetlands currently protected in this province are going to lose that protected status. Changes to the Endangered Species Act that allow developers to destroy habitat if they pay into a fund instead of avoiding the habitat where the creatures live. We call it the Pay to Slay Fund. Conservation authorities, I mean, it's funny, but also horrible. Conservation authorities removed from their role of protecting ecological values and planning. All requirements to build more homes and condos within towns and cities removed. Subdivisions that now can be built anywhere at any time, no planning required, no official plan amendments required. Conservation authorities required to identify all the conservation lands, the places you go with your kids, go with your grandkids, go hiking, those all have to be inventoried for which ones we can build monster homes on by next year. While they were doing all of this, they did nothing to address the requirements that were put in front of them by their own Housing Affordability Task Force that told them how they could build more houses in the places where people want to live and where they can afford them. But in this maelstrom of attacks, you know, it can be hard to keep our bearings. I know I lose my bearings sometimes. It's just like another thing coming. But through all of this, you know, we have worked together. Citizens in this province, we've worked together really, really effectively. We stopped the first round of attacks on the Greenbelt, if you remember, Bill 66 in the fall of December 9th. They made a mistake that time. Remember, they introduced the bill on December 6th, and then the House rose on the 7th, and when they came back in January, we've been organizing for 8 weeks. We scared the hell of them, and they backtracked. We stopped 413 from going ahead as planned by getting the federal government to intervene. We won a legal case that actually stopped the government from walking away from their responsibility on the Holland Marsh destroying Bradford bypass, just south of here. We've informed the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner and the RCMP investigations that are ongoing. We've informed overwhelming media coverage on this issue, and we've helped organize the largest movement for change in Ontario's history. I know Ontarians are on the side of all of us in this room because we've asked them. 86% of the people in this province oppose the Greenbelt attacks and want homes built inside of cities that they can afford for themselves and for their kids. Our government's actions are reckless, irresponsible, and corrupt, and they must be stopped. That means we must work with the federal government to ensure their legislative authority is brought to bear to block destructive projects. It means working with our municipal governments to make sure that they do not cooperate in any way with enabling these attacks on the Greenbelt, and that they ensure that their priorities for building homes inside of their communities are put to the forefront. And it means that our MPPs, not Franz, at the end of the table who are not here, are held accountable for their government's actions, and they are forced to listen to the people in this room, the people across the province, and together we are going to win, and we're going to take back Ontario. Thank you very much.